This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The latest headlines this hour. Boris Johnson is urging Western allies to continue their support for Ukraine at the G summit in Germany. He says the ban on Russian gold will cut the financial supply for the war in Ukraine. The UK, the United States, France, Japan and Canada have agreed to the ban. They're also discussing placing a cap on Russian oil prices. The European Council President Charles Michel agrees, saying G7 leaders all share the same goal.
With G7 countries, we all share the same goals: to cut the oxygen from Russia's war machine while taking care of our economies and the economies of our partners. The EU will stand by the people of Ukraine for the long haul, to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to strongly defend our common democratic values.
Meanwhile, deadly missile strikes have hit the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv for the first time in weeks. A 7-year-old girl trapped underneath fallen rubble had to be pulled to safety after Russian forces hit homes and even a kindergarten. At least one person died and 6 others were hurt. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says medics are still looking for survivors.
The building has been destroyed, and we understand that there are people under rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke, and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Here, Boris Johnson has said he's planning to serve 2 more terms in office, despite the Conservative Party suffering 2 by-election defeats this week. The Prime Minister said he's actively thinking about leading the country into the 2030s. Amid calls from within his own party to resign, he's urged Tory MPs not to focus on the mistakes he may have made. The Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis told GB News the Prime Minister's optimism is a good thing.
We often get criticised in politics and in government around looking at the next election, the next week, the next few years at most. Having somebody who's looking at that long-term benefit, long-term development of our country, I think is a good thing. And the enthusiasm and the drive and the energy that the Prime Minister's got for that and the determination around that, I think is a really positive thing.
Well, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, Scott Lewis, told GB News he doesn't expect Mr Johnson to survive until the end of the year.
Is in trouble over the economy. He's in trouble over his own statements with Partygate. When he's lost the confidence of almost 80% of his backbenchers of his own party, it's really not enough to say, just like Margaret Thatcher said in 1987, I'll go on and on and on. Remember, Margaret Thatcher said that in 87. By 1990, she's out. I think Boris Johnson, having said, I'll be here till the 2030s, could well find himself out by the end of this year.
Families impacted by the COVID pandemic may take legal action against the government over delays to starting the new coronavirus public inquiry. The COVID-19 bereaved Families for Justice group say the 6-month delay in appointing a chair and setting up dates goes beyond the reasonable time allowed by law. The Prime Minister previously said they agreed to do it in spring this year, but he still hasn't set a date for it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now let's return to Nana Akua.
So good afternoon. It's fast approaching 5 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, if you're wondering what happened to the man who put Brexit to the vote during his premiership and then ran away when he didn't get the result he was expecting, well, here's an update. David Cameron, it has been revealed by the Daily Mail, met with Oliver Dowden in a private members' bar in Mayfair known as a place where Boris bashers frequent, weeks before Mr Dowden resigned. Now, by all counts, they denied that there was any link to Mr Dowden's subsequent resignation after the double by-election loss. But what on earth could they have been discussing? The mind boggles. But it seems somewhat of a coincidence that whilst Boris appeared to be blindsided by the announcement, many others didn't appear that surprised. Some are calling it a Cameroon plot. A source close to Mr Cameron's people said this: DC, as in David Cameron, did meet with Oliver Dowden last month. He routinely sees Oliver from time to time, like he does many former colleagues and friends. But he had absolutely no prior knowledge of or involvement in Oliver Dowden's resignation. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? Others coming out of the woodwork are failed ex-Tory leadership candidate Remainer Jeremy Hunt, who failed to plan effectively for a pandemic, and it could be argued during his tenure as Health Secretary, he also failed adequately to get it funded. Leadership failure Remainer Theresa May, who went back and forth in her kitten heels, unable to secure any sort of deal with anyone during her attempts to get Brexit done, despite claiming to be a difficult woman. An ex-Chancellor Remainer George Osborne, the architect of the austerity measures, which it is often argued led many to vote to leave the EU. Word is that the plot may well be hatching to try to destabilise Boris Johnson. And names that have been bandied about for potential leadership include Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi and Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Tom Tugendhat. Others expected to run are Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, Health Secretary Sajid Javid and the dreaded Jeremy Hunt. I think they've all missed the point, actually. In my poll yesterday, I asked our audience, who do you blame for the by-election losses? And I gave them 4 options: disgraced MPs, Boris Johnson, Tory infighting or Tory policies. And the resounding result from almost 3,000 voters was that Tory policies were by far the main reason why the by-elections were lost. Yesterday, when I spoke to Anne Widdecombe, she said this:
make sure that policies happen, which will mean that Brexit is totally irreversible. And to do that, you need a Brexiteer as PM, and you've got one. And think of the risk that you run of getting a Remainer or getting a pseudo-Remainer if you get rid of Boris. Those two are big Brexiteers. What are they thinking of? What are Baker and Britain thinking of?
So if I were them, I would stop massaging their failed egos and being so self-centred to think about the good people of this country in the grips of a cost of living crisis that, in my view, was created largely by the policies of this current government. Instead of trying to grow our economy out of this nightmare, they decided to tax it, resulting in stagflation with both wages and prices rising way too fast, perpetuating further inflation. At this point, I wouldn't care if donkeys were running this country, although I do draw the line at Sir Keir Starmer. Who leads this disaster is the least of their worries. Just sort out the mess that you've all created. Otherwise, you're all out. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. At 5 o'clock, it's Outside. And today, I'll be joined by author turned singer Chibundu Onuzo.
Come home, baby. I know I messed up, but I'm working hard to make things right. Come back to me, my love.
Her novels have received international acclaim from the New York Times and The Guardian, and now she is turning her hand to music. We'll meet her shortly. She'll be joining me later on in the studio. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interest? Boris Johnson will oppose sweeping new steel tariffs as part of an effort to win back support in Red Wall seats. But Tory ministers have said that this move is Labour-backed, anti-free market, anti-capitalist, and most importantly, very unconservative. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? And coming up at the end of the show, it's Worldview. Now, there was a second day of protests across the US in the wake of the historic Supreme Court decision that ended the constitutional right to abortion. Host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge, will explain all of that. That is all on the way in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy and also consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Right. Well, welcome to you. Now, I've got to say, obviously, this was in the mail. So, I mean, I'm going to start with you, Andrew. This whole thing about this plotting, the Cameroon plan, apparently, what's going on?
Look, David Cameron has never, ever come to terms with the fact Boris Johnson beat him. They were both at Eton, big posh school, both at Oxford, both clever. And Boris always thought he should have been there before Cameron. Cameron got there and blew it, didn't he? Because he held a referendum and campaigned very hard, long and hard, for us to stay in the European Union. And Boris was in mood with it caught the national mood. He still has the national mood, and but the Cameroons are plotting, and the fact that David Cameron met Oliver Dowden in 5 Hertford Street, very smart private members club, bit out of my price range at £2,800 a year membership, and I think a gin and tonic there about 20 quid. That's why I don't go very often. But Dowden and Cameron are like this. They're best buddies, and it is not a coincidence that they were spotted there. It's meant to be discreet, but no place is discreet, really, if you're a former Prime Minister, a former Tory leader. When you get Tory MPs together, any MPs together, they plot and they scheme, and they are trying to work out the best way to bring down Boris Johnson. And Oliver Dowden, resigning as Tory chairman in the hours after those 2 by-election defeats, he didn't give the Prime Minister any warning. He published a letter, as you always do when you resign from the Cabinet, pledging his undying loyalty to the Tory party, but not to Boris Johnson. So that was a very significant first step, I think, in the campaign to unseat Boris Johnson, which will continue now throughout the summer.
Now, listen, this reminds me of The Apprentice. When they start fighting, you think, just win, and then you can mess about once you've won. As you watch this, do you agree with our viewers yesterday that they say Tory party policies are the reason why these by-elections were lost and not the actual leader itself?
Well, it is. It's all this in-house fighting which is so unattractive and puts people off because they're just fighting with each other. But I have to say, also, my sources have said to me today, which I told you earlier, that David Cameron was also seen before with Oliver at the Marks Club in Mayfair having discussions. Maybe it was the knives are definitely out. Boris is away, has been in Rwanda. Sharpening, or Dominic Cummings was there as concierge or a waiter, maybe, rubbing his hands with glee, don't you think?
Well, I think so. And Cameron, his chums are people like Jeremy Hunt, the former health secretary, who, the longest-serving health secretary we've ever had, who did not put in place the proper planning for a pandemic, which he was supposed to have done. He admits he should have done it. He's also had this Paul on the road to Damascus conversion about lockdown, now saying in a book which he published a few weeks ago, actually, if I'd been in charge, I wouldn't have locked the country down in such a drastic way.
What he
never said that at the time, did he? No. He wanted us to go further and longer and counselled Boris against coming out. Because remember, Boris took a risk politically by coming out of lockdown sooner than other countries, sooner than the Labour Party wanted him to be. If Keir Starmer was Prime Minister, we'd still be in lockdown, actually.
Exactly, and look what lockdowns did. I mean, the first lockdown, if lockdowns didn't work the first time, they're not going to... It's like a mad person saying, keep doing the same thing and you'll get the, a different answer. You won't. And sadly, I really do think that Boris is up against it now. He really is, and he has to do something. Things him saying about being re-elected again and again, it is just disillusional.
Do you think?
I do think so. I think with the soaring inflation, with the political turmoil we've got, with the strikes, the Prime Minister just seems to me to be not... I just think the whole of the country has lost their faith in him and trust in some way. I just feel he's being disillusional. I really do.
I think, unfortunately, what's happening here is it's this death by 1,000 cuts and it's still happening. They won't leave him alone. And in the end, it sticks, doesn't it? If people won't stop going at you, in the end, they're chipping away at him. And I think it's very unwise. And the reason why it's so unwise is because in the end, they're chipping away at themselves and they can't even see it. The worst bit is, we are watching this, and in the meantime, everything is going to hell in a handcart. I mean, look at the economy, look at the plans they've come up. Rishi Sunak with the nonsense spring statement showed that he was so detached. Finally, now they're talking about plans where they're going to protect British steel, but, then that sort of flies in the face of their sort of Tory faithful who would say, well, maybe you shouldn't because it's anti-capitalist and all. And it just doesn't seem to be working out. They've lost their way. And unfortunately, I think the infighting is the main reason.
Well, the infighting is the main reason, but also I do think that Keir Starmer going on and on and on about Partygate had somehow sunk in with the country because he didn't stop. And sadly, people have lost their faith, don't believe in Boris. And can we have a Prime Minister that is, everyone thinks is a liar? And will he be a laughingstock internationally now? I just think the Partygate he has not been able to get away from, which I feel is a shame because there are so much more important issues like, as we say, high cost of living and what's going on in Ukraine.
The thing is, the Tory party has to remember that nothing the public despises more than a government that is not united, a government that's turning on itself, fighting itself, self-indulgent when the country is literally saying it's going to hell in a handcart economically. This is the worst economic crisis in my lifetime. I'm a lot older than you. Much the worst economic crisis. And we always see Tories taking pot shots at each other and positioning. And who do they want to replace Boris Johnson with?
Exactly.
Tell me who it is. It was obvious when Theresa May had to go. She tried not once, not twice, was it 3 times or even 4 times to get that wretched Brexit deal through the Commons, which wasn't a Brexit deal. So she resigned honourably, to be fair, although she should have gone before, and Boris was the obvious successor because he had a plan to get Brexit done. Hey, he did.
But do you not feel that now Boris should, as Margaret Thatcher did, step down with a bit of dignity? Or does he keep going on? It's like a cat that keeps coming on your knee and he keeps pushing it off.
He's got to fight on, because the worry is if he resigns, Lizzie, we then get Jeremy Hunt.
Yeah, Remainer.
And as Anne Widdecombe said, a Remainer who will do everything he can to unpick it. These Remainers, people like Michael Heseltine, all these people out of the Labour Party, they will do everything they can to unpick Brexit.
But
We've
you
got
cannot
to make sure
unpick Brexit because the people voted for Brexit. There
You
will be
watch them.
protests and all sorts.
Won't stop
The
them.
public
Won't
voted, the
stop
people
It won't
voted
stop
for
them.
Brexit.
It won't. It's got nothing to do with... Because, look, the people voted in their droves, really, for Boris Johnson. And in the end, his party have literally started to eat themselves from the inside out. And everybody else, the Labour Party, Liberal Democrats, everybody is at Boris. They don't care what we voted for. They're the ones that even trying to change the rules of the 1922 committee just so that we don't have to... So that therefore he can't stay for the full year. I mean, they will do literally anything. And it's just awful.
But they knew these by-elections were going to be lost. It's called mid-term. But also not just mid-term. Let's imagine why did we have the by-election in Wakefield, where the Tories won that seat for the first time in 80 years, tiny majority. The previous Tory MP is banged up in prison for sexually assaulting a young man under the age of 16. And in Tiverton and Honiton, which was a 24,000 majority, the wretched Tory MP watching porn in the Commons chamber. Oh, my God. Why would you vote Tory in that constituency?
It is unbelievable. And Tiverton and Honiton, as I said, you could have a teddy bear with a blue badge. It would have won. It's unbelievable. And I'm sure... I would be surprised if Cameron had a hand in it, honestly. I really think that.
It's just revolting, isn't it? Can you imagine a grown man watching porn in the Commons chamber?
I mean,
the speakers there, women MPs nearby, men. It's offensive,
absolutely, absolutely appalling and offensive and disgusting. And I just couldn't believe it.
They were always going to lose that constituency. If there'd been a 50,000 Tory majority, they'd have lost it.
Well, see, I
a protest.
Because if people watch porn, that's fine. I don't really care about that. But don't do it at work where everyone can see you. Because unfortunately, there is the risk that you'll offend people.
And, the Commons chamber is televised the whole time.
You've got cameras everywhere. I mean, how thick?
Can't he wait till he gets home?
Well, our political correspondents have told me that literally everyone can see everyone because the chairs are so close you can look over. So he obviously wasn't that bothered.
And it wasn't the first time.
Would happen.
But remember, he said he was looking at tractors. Of course he was.
But it's just humiliating. Yeah. It really, really is.
And it's a farming constituency, and the farmers thought, we don't want to vote for it.
But the Conservative Party at the minute is a shambles, and I'm going to say, I'm going to be honest, if Boris was to stay in, I wouldn't vote Conservative. I'm asking Andy Burnham, get him, know he's with Manchester, but if he were the leader of Labour, I think I would vote.
You just
well, I do like his eyes.
Have you ever met him?
You just like
I have met him, actually.
He's
terribly, charismatic.
Yes.
But he has everything that Keir Starmer hasn't got. Charisma,
but they haven't got
strength.
That's great, but what about their policies? See, I'm not happy with the fact that they think they can sit on the back burner waiting for the Tories to fail and then just saying, well, we can't say what our policies are until we get there because we don't know what the economy will be like. That's not good enough for me. I need a bit more meat on the bones before I can even consider them.
Given their manifesto, have they? Labour are keeping it very close to their
chest. That's not good enough.
But it's not good enough.
That's not good enough.
People are saying, oh, they don't want to show their sword. No, it's because they don't have a clue. No. And Keir Starmer, going on about the win, at Wakefield, it was like he'd won the election.
Talk about
He
historic.
needs to step down, whether he gets a fine or not. He needs to.
I mean, like I said, a donkey would be better
He
than
used the
Star.
word historic. Hang on, they got a seat back, which they'd never had, that the Tories had never held before in 80 years.
It's hardly historic.
It's hardly historic.
Yes.
And also, apparently, it did seem that the Tories did not really come out and vote, so, you know...
They stayed at home.
They stayed at home, and they won't
That's
stay
what
at
you do in
home.
by-elections.
They won't stay at home at a general election. Well, what do you think? Get in touch. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, after the break, it will be time for the Great British Debate this hour. That wasn't it. I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Now, Boris Johnson will impose sweeping new steel tariffs as part of an effort to win back support in Red Wall seats. But Tory ministers have said that this move is Labour-backed, anti-free market, anti-capitalist and, most importantly, very unconservative. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Send me your thoughts at gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tell me what you think. You can also tweet at GBNews. And right now there is a poll asking that question, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Cast your vote now, but first let's get some weather.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking on the unsettled side as low pressure sits across the northwest. Let's take a look at the details. Further showers are expected across southwest England this afternoon. Some could be on the heavy side with the odd rumble of thunder too. Breezy and feeling fairly cool. Plenty of sunshine to come across southwest England and the London area. The odd light shower is possible, but most places staying dry. Scattered showers will continue for much of Wales this afternoon. Some will be heavy and potentially thundery. Brisk winds continuing for most. It's a mixed picture for northwest England this afternoon. There will be some showers, but also spells of sunshine. Staying windy towards the coast with highs of around 20 degrees Celsius. Spells of hazy sunshine developing across northeast England through the rest of the day. There's a risk of a few showers towards the north and west. Outbreaks of rain will continue across Scotland this afternoon. The best of the dry conditions will be towards the far north, highs reaching around 16 degrees. Sunny spells and frequent heavy showers for Northern Ireland this afternoon. Winds remaining gusty around the coasts too. A cool feeling day with highs of just 15 or 16 degrees. Blustery showers continuing this evening in the north and west, staying mainly dry in the south and east. That's how the weather's shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 25 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. You're watching or listening. This is GB News on TV, online, on digital radio. Now, we were doing our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Boris Johnson's going to risk fresh allegations that he is breaking international law this week as he imposes sweeping new steel tariffs as part of an effort to win back support in Red Wall seats. The Prime Minister is preparing to hit several developing countries with a new safeguard for import limits designed to protect UK's manufacturers from a flood of cheap steel from overseas. But Tory ministers have said that this move is Labour-backed, anti-free market, anti-capitalist and, most importantly, very unconservative. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Now, listen, we are actually going to go live now to the Bavarian Alps at the G7 summit, where the US President Joe Biden is speaking.
This will be essential to meeting the growing demand for reliable, security, high-tech connectivity in 3 key regions of the world. Third, gender. When women and girls have the ability and the opportunity to participate more fully in their societies and economies, we see positive impacts not only in their communities, but around the board, across the board. We have to increase those opportunities, though, for women and girls to thrive, including practical steps to make childcare more accessible and affordable as we continue the vital work to protect and advance women's fundamental rights. The United States is committing $15 million over 5 years to the World Bank Global Child Care Incentive Fund. This public-private partnership, supported by several G7 partners, will help countries build infrastructure that makes it easier for women to participate equally in the labor force. Fourth, and very important, climate and energy. We're seeing just how critical this is every day. The entire world is feeling the impact of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine and on our energy markets. We need worldwide effort to invest in transformative clean energy projects to ensure that critical infrastructure is resilient to changing climate. Critical materials that are necessary for our clean energy transition, including the production of batteries, need to be developed with high standards for labor and environment. Fast and reliable transportation infrastructure, including railroads and ports, is essential to moving inputs for refining and processing and expanding access to clean energy technologies. For example, the U.S. government just facilitated a new partnership between 2 American firms and the government of Angola to invest $2 billion in building the new solar projects in Angola. It's a partnership that will help Angola meet its climate goals and energy needs while creating new markets for American technologies and good jobs in Angola, and I suspect throughout Africa. And in Romania, the American company NuScale Power will build the first of its kind small modular reactor plant. This will help bring online zero-emission nuclear energy to Europe faster, more cheaply, and more efficiently. The U.S. government is helping advance the development of this groundbreaking American technology, which will strengthen Europe's energy security and create thousands of jobs in Romania and the United States. These deals are just some of what's in store. And we're ready. We're ready to get to work together, all of us, to lead efforts, to lead U.S. efforts, in my case. I appointed Amos Hochstein, my special presidential coordinator, to deal with the rest of our colleagues. I'll lead the U.S. whole-of-government approach to drive a coalition and a collaboration with the G7 and our partners around the world, including private sector and multilateral development banks. I want to be clear. This isn't aid or charity. It's an investment that will deliver returns for everyone, including the American people and the people of all our nations. It will boost all of our economies. It's a chance for us to share our positive vision for the future, to let communities around the world see themselves and see for themselves the concrete benefits of partnering with democracies. Because when democracies demonstrate what we can do, all that we have to offer, I have no doubt that we'll win the competition every time. Thank you. Now I invite President van der Leyen to the podium.
Thank you very much, Joe, Mr. President. Thank you, Olaf, Herr Bundeskanzler. We've just tried to overcome a global pandemic, and it shook the global economy. And then, as the global economy was just recovering, Russia's vicious attack on Ukraine happened, driving prices up everywhere from food to energy and casting deep uncertainty, especially in the most fragile countries. These are very severe challenges. We will tackle them head-on, and this is why G7 partners are gathered here. But this must...
So that's Ursula von der Leyen there, speaking at the G7 summit live. We got a bit of Joe Biden as well. If you just joined us, this is GB News. We are online on TV and on digital radio. Joining me is Lizzie Cundy and also Andrew Pearce. We listened to that. Did you catch much of what Joe Biden was saying, Andrew?
Quite enough, frankly. Dreary, boring, uninspiring. And he's the leader of the free world, God help us. He's got the worst poll ratings now of an American president of modern times, and it's hardly surprising. And he's talking about a second term. So worried that he'll even get through a first term.
He's not going to live that. I mean, I don't mean to I don't think he'll make it.
As you said, he's got on his notes, enter room, he has to be told.
He's so bad.
He's so old.
I'm just lucky he didn't fall off there. Have you saw him on the bike?
I know. But we saw Trump actually speaking earlier, and there's only about 4 or 5 years difference. But honestly, Trump could be 15 years younger. Now, I'm not a great fan of Donald Trump's, but God, he's dynamic compared to Biden.
Oh, I like Donald Trump. I love all his little one-liners and his mess on Twitter and the way.
Well, and life was never dull.
No, he's quite. I thought, and also during his reign, there were no real. He didn't instigate any wars at all.
No, I know, but he has signed. Biden has signed the gun legislation at last. Something done about the gun laws a bit.
Yeah.
But look at the problems they've got.
He was vice president for 8 years. Nothing happened. He's been a senator for 50 years, and nothing's happened. I predict nothing will happen again, Lizzie.
Right.
Despite his weak
they have a lot of
words.
troubles in America, as we know at the minute, with the new abortion laws with the Supreme Court. So a lot, not just Boris Johnson got troubles at home.
Well, that summit will roll on, and actually, coming up after 5 o'clock, we'll be discussing what on earth the G7 is all about, whether it's actually relevant at all, and what on earth they do there. It looks like a load of talk, but we'll be discussing that after 5 o'clock. Here with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online, and on digital radio. Now, after the break, we'll kickstart the Great British Debate. And I'm asking, is appeasing the red wall a conflict of Tory interests? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories. US President Joe Biden has been urging Western allies to stay together against Russia at the G7 summit in Germany. President Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson formally announced today that they'll ban the import of Russian gold, the country's second largest export after energy. They say the ban on Russian gold will cut the financial supply for the war in Ukraine. The UK, the US, France, Japan and Canada have all agreed to the ban. The European Council President, Charles Michel, agrees, saying G7 leaders all share the same goal.
With G7 countries, we all share the same goals: to cut the oxygen from Russia's war machine while taking care of our economies and the economies of our partners. The EU will stand by the people of Ukraine for the long haul to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity, and to strongly defend our common democratic values.
Meanwhile, deadly missile strikes have hit the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, for the first time in weeks. A 7-year-old girl trapped underneath fallen rubble had to be pulled to safety after Russian forces hit homes and a kindergarten. At least one person died and 6 others were hurt. The city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says medics are still looking for survivors. And Boris Johnson has said he's planning to serve 2 more terms in office, despite the Conservative Party suffering 2 by-election defeats this week. The PM said he's actively thinking about leading the country into the 2030s, amid calls from within his own party to resign. And he urged Tory MPs not to focus on the mistakes he may have made. Families impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic may take legal action against the government over delays to starting the coronavirus public inquiry. The COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group say the 6-month delay in appointing a chair and setting up a date goes beyond reasonable time allowed by law. The Prime Minister previously said they agreed to start that in the spring, but he hasn't yet set a date. Those are the headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Nana Akua is here after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So it is 37 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Boris Johnson will risk fresh allegations that he is breaking international law this week as he imposes sweeping new steel tariffs as part of an effort to win back support in Red Wall seats. But Tory ministers have said that this move is Labour-backed, it's anti-free market, it's anti-capitalist, and most importantly, it's actually very unconservative. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? Right, so I'm joined now by Conservative MP for Ashfield, Lee Anderson. Lee, right, I want to start with this then. A lot of these moves, people are saying anti-conservative. For example, the steel, keeping all the protectionisms around that as well, it seems like an anti-Tory thing. What do you think?
Well, I think, Nana, I've got lots of friends who work in the steel industry, and they tell me that their order books are full. They cannot keep up with the work at the moment. So I think it's not appeasing. I think it's about being sensible. It's about being wise. It's about protecting those steel jobs, you know, in the short term, because let's not forget, we've just come out of COVID. We've had all the world's been locked down. Now we've got a war in Ukraine, which is affecting everything. I think at this time, just for this time only, that some of our industry needs government to wrap their arms around them a little bit and help them and support them through this difficult time. And if we do, we're going to come out of this much better and much stronger, and we'll save thousands and thousands of jobs.
So what do you think then in terms of some of the policies that they've already come out with at the moment, though, because a lot of people have looked at them. There's been a lot of money handed out. They're giving extra benefits, all of those kind of things. People are looking at that thinking we're spending too much, and that really isn't a Conservative thing.
I agree with that 100%. You know, I have this conversation every single week down there in London. We are spending far too much money. We spent over £400 billion during the pandemic. We need to tighten our belts, easy for me to say, on a good salary, as I always point out. But yes, the country needs to stop spending money. We're on a credit card at the moment, and you know we're not making no repayments back on that credit card. It's a tough time, and I want to see our government cut taxes. I want to make sure we get people back into work. You know, we've got 1.6 million vacancies in this country and probably 1 million people on the dole at the moment. That's not right. We need to get people back to work, get them upskilled, get them trained, get them into high-paid jobs. You know, and the way you get people into high-paid jobs is not necessarily paying a higher rate for a job. Is to get them that education and training that they need to get a better job. And it's always been like that in this country. And I think we've sort of forgot that. We just, you know, like with the rail workers at the moment, who I don't, you know, I think they should have a pay rise. Of course they should. But, you know, the industry that they work in has got to be profitable. It's got to be slimmed down. You know, they're getting less people travelling on the trains. You know, they've got to make cuts, you know, in their own industry to make sure that they run a proper service and give taxpayers proper value for money, like all private industry has to.
Now, do you know, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Now, you know, yesterday in my show, I asked people, I asked our viewers and listeners, what do you blame most for the by-election losses? I gave them 4 options. I said disgraced MPs, of course, Neil Parish and Imad Ahmed. But we asked Boris Johnson, Tory infighting, or the policies. And it was a resounding Tory policies that was the thing. But at the moment, we're watching a whole cascade of infighting. What would you say to them? Because I'm watching it. I want them to get on with the cost of living and dealing with that. I'm sick and tired, sick to my back teeth of watching them jostling for position and leadership when, if you don't do a good job, you're all out. What would you say to them for that?
Well, you're absolutely right, Nana. I get fed up to the back teeth of it. I didn't expect, you know, 2 years into being a member of Parliament that would be backbiting, fighting with each other. And quite frankly, the British public deserve better. You know, I think they need a strong government, and I think we can be a strong government if certain people stop fighting within our ranks. Boris has won the confidence vote. He's got a massive majority. He's got a massive mandate from the British public, and we need to crack on now and deliver on the promises that we made in 2019. And if the people don't like him at the next election, they can vote him out. But in the meantime, let's get together. You know, let's pull together the whole country. We're going through the most difficult time in my lifetime, and I would just wish, for goodness sake, stop it and get on and help the British people.
Lee Anderson, well said. That's Lee Anderson, MP. He's there, a Conservative MP for Ashfield. Thank you so much, Lee. Good to talk to you again. Right, I'm also joined by the Associate Editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, I want to ask you, Boris Johnson said he wants to win back the Red Wall MPs. Do you think that he's going about it in the right way? And the way he's going about it, would you say it's an anti-Conservative way?
Well, I thought that Lee Anderson, as a Northern Conservative MP, was a refreshing interview because I couldn't disagree with a word he said. I think that the problem for the Tories at the moment is that they're heading for those Heseltine sort of days of picking winners. And picking winners is a mug's game. It very rarely works. In fact, it rarely works at all. And while at the same time I agree with Lee Anderson that we do need to protect the steel industry, at least until the recession, which is looming, is over, I think that we must be very careful how much more money we pour into supporting industries that may never be viable in their own right.
But the collapse of British Steel would be a terrible thing. I mean, we need to be able to build our own ships. We've seen what happens if there's war, or if there's pandemics. Those people who supply the very things that we need to sustain ourselves decide to supply themselves and not us. Do you think that it's a conflict of Conservative interests, though? Because, as you said, you know, they need to start thinking about, you know, being too generous will create kind of almost like a lazy narrative. Do you think that they need to be? Do you think it's a conflict of their interests in doing this?
Well, it is a conflict. I mean, you're right that the steel industry is a special case, and it's a strategic industry that needs support. We need to have a steel industry, as we've discovered so much to our cost in recent times. We can't rely on other countries, and in particular China and Russia. But there is a conflict in the sense that money is being drawn out of the prosperous, money-generating south of England, I mean, particularly the City of London, and transferred to the north, which may be deserving, but nonetheless is an expensive proposition. You can't do one without the other. You've got to have a thriving city and city-based and southern-based money-generating world, which is going to support all of England, all of Britain.
I think you make a very, very interesting point. Trevor, thank you so much for joining me. It's Trevor Kavanagh. He's the Associate Editor to The Sun. Right, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined now by columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. I'm going to come to you, Andrew, because straight away, what he said actually resonated with me, that you cannot have this... you cannot impoverish one part of the country. So the place where you're drawing the cash from, which is the southeast, if you tighten the belt on there and increase taxes, then you cannot supply the more impoverished parts of this country.
He has got a point, but you know where I'd start this argument slightly differently. These wretched Tory ministers privately whinging about the benefits for the steel industry going on. It's not very Tory. What's Tory about putting up taxes? This government has put up taxes to put up national insurance. Why did they do that? They're about to put up corporation tax, which is a tax on company profits. That's un-Tory. That's why the by-elections were bad, not least because, apart from the fact that two previous Tory MPs were such sleazebags.
Exactly.
But you know why? We want a government that's very Tory. Now, on the steel industry, Trevor Kavanagh makes a point. It is strategically very important we have a steel industry. I mean, one of my great fears is that when this ridiculous overpriced HS2 railway link is built, it will probably be with Chinese steel because it will be cheaper. So that's why I think for a short term we should put in place tariffs to stop cheaper imports coming in to protect that industry. But remember, it's not just the Red Wall, Nana. There's also Wales. There's a big steel industry in Wales. That's not Red Wall. That's Labour heartland territory where the Tories have got a few seats. There's a steel industry in the Midlands as well. So it's a very important step the Prime Minister's taking, and it's not just about protecting the Red Wall. It's about protecting a really, really important industry. Because if it goes to the wall, then we're at the mercy of China and countries like that who've got no interest in Britain whatsoever.
Lizzie.
Well, I just feel like Boris is becoming a bit like Fagin from Oliver Twist. Got to pick a pocket or two. You know, we could start a trade war here, and I just think you can't breach international rules, Andrew. And
you can't.
Well, why not?
You can't because it's not right, and only Boris can do it because that's what Boris seems to do and doesn't play by the rules. Look, and I know we're all in, terrible times for people at the minute. It really is. But I just think he cannot be breaking World Trade Organization rules, which is international law.
Yeah, look, I get that, but the World Trade Organization sets sets rules about which we regulate, but they don't set the wages that are paid in these emerging countries where they're competing, which we've got to compete with. So steel coming in from Indonesia where they're paid a slave wage. We can't compete on fair terms with that. And the WTO does nothing about that, so we're not competing fairly, which is why I think we've got to, just for the short term, because we're about to go into a deep recession, and we are going to be in a recession, and it could be the worst for decades. That's why we've got to protect this industry big time.
So you think this is Boris is doing this for his country, not for his own gain?
I do. And I think sometimes we've got to think the Prime Minister... One of the Prime Minister's job is to defend the defence of the realm and also defence of industry and the economy and jobs. And frankly, the Tory government has not done a very good job on protecting the economy because it's put up too many taxes and it's spent too much money, in my view, coming out of COVID.
Well, I think he's right. And he's taking a risk, isn't he? Because if he breaks World Trade Organization rules in a way...
Which lots of other countries do,
Well, yes, of course they do. And Lord Guy cited that as one of the reasons why he's resigning. He said that he would be breaching his role as a minister. Therefore, he didn't want to breach international law by actually by going along with his policy, by breaking World Trade Organization rules. But I actually think that on this occasion, Boris Johnson is stepping out, risking his premiership in a sense by looking after the country, by
but
it can work. But listen, it can work both ways because what you've got there is, and actually the Labour Party are behind him on this one, for a change. But what you've got there is him stepping out, risking his backbenchers who are already out for his head. So he's out there, but he's trying to protect the country from an influx of very cheap steel, which is created in the way that Andrew said, by cheap labour, so therefore we cannot compete with it. And as a result of that, we are reliant then on foreign sources because we will shrink and remove our own industries. And we saw exactly what happens when that happens with COVID, because we couldn't even make PPE.
We're going to start a trade war, aren't we?
Yeah, but otherwise we couldn't even make PPE. I mean, remember that?
China don't play by the fair rules, and lots of other countries don't. I mean, when we were in the European Union, we always religiously went by all the rules, and France and Germany used to laugh at us because they broke the rules whenever it suited them. So it's just a bit of statesmanship, in my view, Lizzie, and occasionally the Prime Minister's got to say, I'm terribly sorry about the world.
Because his own party are fighting left, right and centre, pulling,
you would not say that if you were a family in a steel town which is about to be whacked with a wave of more cheap imports from emerging economies, where the Prime Minister can step in and say, I'm going to protect those jobs.
To me, this is a bit like Brexit.
I think he's looking after
so I'm sorry. No, but to me, this is a bit like Brexit. The reason why many people voted to leave the EU was, frankly, because of the influx of foreign labour force, which then brought down the price for the indigenous population in this country. And this is kind of what's happening again, and that's the reason why we got out of that situation, so that we could move independently and to be able to be quite agile. And I think that's a good thing. But let's see what you're saying, because this show's nothing without you. Let's welcome our great British voice to the show. Your opportunity to tell us what you think about what we're discussing. Where should we head over to? Should we go to Kidderminster? Oh, nice little place there. I've never been there, actually.
I have.
Have you?
It's known locally as Kiddy.
Oh, is that right? Let's have a chat with the owner of the community interest company, John Reid. John, welcome to the programme. John, what do you think about all of this? Do you think that actually the way that the Prime Minister is going along, in a sense, appeasing the Red Wall, supposedly with supporting things like our steel industry, that is a conflict of Tory interests?
Where do I start, Nana? I think the lunatics have taken over the asylum. Absolutely bonkers. You've got a man, Boris Johnson, who lost 2 votes last week, 2 electoral register votes, absolutely legitimate, and then he talks about going into a 3rd term in office. In my book, if he got another 3 days, that would be about as much as I would give him. This is a man that really, if you think of who people would vote for, you have to have some kind of trust for them, some kind of respect that they're going to do the right thing for you and for your country, your family, and everything else.
But John, wouldn't you say that he's protecting the steel industry? He's actually doing something for the country, not for himself, because he risks his leadership. And a lot of his backbenchers may potentially not support him, but yet the Labour Party seem to be behind him.
Yeah, but I don't trust or respect him or believe that he's going to do it. He'll start a trade war, won't he? What do you think other countries in the world would do if we started charging them for their imports into our country? They would do the same, so it's ridiculous. So, yeah, of course he's trying to appease the voters.
But what would you do then? But then wouldn't you risk just shrinking your own steel industry? Then if we get a situation where we need to make our own ships, for example, you can see that there's a war, could end up as a 3rd World War, we could be at the mercy of somewhere like China.
Could be. They didn't think twice about shrinking the coal industry, did they?
Well, that's
true. They didn't think twice about wasting all the natural gas in the North Sea.
Well, maybe that's why they're thinking twice now, John.
Sorry, Nana. Here's a man who I read today was only stopped from building a treehouse in the Garden of Chequers at a cost of, what, £100,000 or so, paid for by a Tory donor, because the police said it would be a security risk. I wouldn't trust him any further than I could throw him. I think it's an absolute joke.
Well, listen, John, it's such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for your views. That's John Reid out there in Kidderminster. Right, let's quickly...
Expensive treehouse.
It was very expensive.
Do you not think
It must be very elaborate. I'd like to know who's going to build it.
It's a bit like the duck mate, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
that one?
Well, 100,000 used to be able to buy a proper house for that.
No, you can't even buy a garage for that now. Well, listen, today I'm asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your views. Let's see. Johnny says that the stupid thing is a lot of Red Wall voters were natural Tory voters, people who want lower taxes, less interference in their lives, are self-sufficient, have common sense and are not woke. All Boris does is try to appeal to voters who will never vote for the Tories. Now, Roger says they've been ignored by the Labour Party, who look no further than the ideology of the Islington elite, then ignored by the Tories, who have no real idea that life even exists north of the M25. Tory says if Boris can keep a promise in those areas, then he is on to a winner. The forgotten Red Wall areas won't forget come a general election. But time is running out for him and money is tight. Right now, I've got a poll up right now on Twitter asking throughout the show, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? And currently, 44% of you say yes, and I think it must be 56% because 44, it says 55 here, but somebody can't add up. 56% of you say no. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll be speaking to our very own Calvin Robertson. Now, he has been ordained after a long battle with the Church of England, but not by them. But first, let's go for a break. Be back in a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. If you've just joined me, where have you been? It's coming up to 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, GB News presenter Calvin Robertson has finally been ordained after a very lengthy battle with the Church of England. After his route to priesthood was halted by the Church of England due to his personal views, Calvin turned to the Global Anglicans Future Conference. Let's take a look at the moment that Calvin was ordained at the Christ Church in Harlesden yesterday.
Will you, in the strength of the Holy Spirit, continually stir up the gift of God that is in you, to make Christ known among all whom you serve?
By the grace of God, I will.
Congregation, stand. Brothers and sisters, you have heard how great is the charge that this ordinance is ready to undertake. And you have heard his declarations. Is it now your will that he should be ordained?
It is.
Will you continually pray for him?
We will.
Will you uphold and encourage him in his ministry?
We will.
Send down the Holy Spirit on thy servant Calvin, for the office and work of a deacon in thy church. Strengthen him by the gift of thy sevenfold grace. Make him faithful to serve and constant in advancing the gospel in the world. May he follow the example of Jesus Christ, thy Son, who washed the feet of his disciples and set the needs of others before his own. May he excel in every virtue, in love, that is sincere, in concern for the sick and poor, in an assuming authority, in self-discipline, and in holiness of life. May his words declare thy love, and his actions reveal thy glory, that thy people may walk with him in the way of truth, and be made ready for the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom with thee and the Holy Ghost belong glory and honour, worship and praise, now and forever. Amen. Thy heralds brought us tidings, oh, let us serve so we.
Well, that was lovely, wasn't it? But I'm glad it ended when he started singing. I'm pleased to say that Calvin joins me now. Calvin, congratulations. I love the bit where he went to sort of touch your hair, and then he didn't know where to put his hand. That was great.
I love that too. That's the first time I've seen that. It was lovely to see my mum and my dad in the audience there in the congregation. I had Lawrence Fox giving a wonderful reading. I had Bishop Gavin Ashenden giving a sermon. It was such a wonderful day with lots of support. It was very wholesome and faithful.
So how do you feel, and what does it mean you can now do now you're ordained?
It means I can now serve Christ, and I can serve the local community of Harlesden in London, which, when God calls you to something, no person can get in his way, no matter how wicked or woke, not pointing any fingers at anyone in particular. But, people try to get in the way of God's plans, but no one can do that.
No, that's great. So you must have a service soon then. When's your first one?
Yeah. So I apologise for not being with you and Leo this weekend, but I got ordained yesterday. I led my first service today with my congregation in Harlesden. It's Christ Church Harlesden. People are welcome to join any Sunday at 11 a.m. I got up there straight away the next day. All the pressure was on. I'm glad I've done it. It was a fantastic experience, and lots of faithful people are turning up. So we're doing Christ's work, or at least we're trying, all for the greater glory of God.
That's amazing, Calvin. Of course, you're going to still have time for GB News, right? You're not going anywhere, right? You're still going to be on my show.
Absolutely. Nana, I will never quit your show. But yeah, I'll still be on with Dan Wootton on a Tuesday. I'll still be on with you at the weekend. And my new show should be launching soon on GB News on a Sunday. So keep your eyes peeled for that too.
That's fabulous, as long as it's not in my slot. Calvin, thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you. That's Calvin.
God bless you, Nana.
Thank you. Newly ordained, of course, GB News presenter. Right, you're watching me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. More to come in the next hour. It is fast approaching 1 minute or 2 minutes after 5 o'clock. For my next hour, me and my panel, we're taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. The latest news headlines this hour. US President Joe Biden is urging Western allies at the G7 summit in Germany to stand united against Russia. President Biden and Prime Minister Boris Johnson formally announced today they'll ban the import of Russian gold, the country's second largest export after energy. European Council President Charles Michel says the ban will cut the financial supply for the war in Ukraine.
With G7 countries, we all share the same goals: to cut the oxygen from Russia's war machine while taking care of our economies and the economies of our partners. The EU will stand by the people of Ukraine for the long haul to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity and to strongly defend our common democratic values.
Well, as the G7 leaders have been gathering, Russia has launched a series of deadly missile strikes in the Ukrainian capital for the first time in weeks. A 7-year-old girl trapped underneath fallen rubble had to be pulled to safety after Russian forces hit homes and a kindergarten near Kyiv. At least one person died and 6 others were hurt in that incident. And the city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, said medics are still looking for survivors.
The building has been destroyed, and we understand that there are people under rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke, and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Here, the Prime Minister has said he's planning to serve 2 more terms in office, despite the Conservative Party suffering 2 by-election defeats this week. Boris Johnson said he's actively thinking about leading the country into the 2030s. Amid calls from within his own party to resign, he's urged Tory MPs not to focus on the mistakes he may have made. Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis told GB News the Prime Minister's optimism is a good thing.
And we often get criticised in politics and in government around looking at the next election, the next week, the next few years at most. Having somebody who's looking at that long-term benefit, long-term development of our country, I think is a good thing. And the enthusiasm and the drive and the energy that the Prime Minister's got for that, and the determination around that, I think is a really positive thing.
However, Professor of International Politics at the University of Birmingham, Scott Lucas, told GB News he doesn't expect to see Mr Johnson survive until the end of this year.
Is in trouble over the economy. He's in trouble over his own statements with Partygate. When he's lost the confidence of almost 80% of his backbenchers of his own party, it's really not enough to say, just like Margaret Thatcher said in 1987, I'll go on and on and on. Remember, Margaret Thatcher said that in 87. By 1990, she's out. I think Boris Johnson, having said, I'll be here till the 2030s, could well find himself out by the end of this year.
Families impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic may take legal action against the government over delays to starting the coronavirus public inquiry. The COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group says the 6-month delay in appointing a chair and setting a date goes beyond reasonable time allowed by law. The Prime Minister previously suggested they agree to do it in the spring, but he hasn't yet set a date for it. You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now back to Nana Akua.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics that are hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy and also consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Still to come, each Sunday at 5 o'clock, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career to take a look at life after the job. We'll talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. Today we're going outside authors. And I'm delighted to be joined by the talented author Chibundu Onuzo. Her novels have received international acclaim from New York, from the New York Times and The Guardian. And now she's turning her hand to outside to music. We'll be talking to her shortly. And as ever, another great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? Now, the G7 summit in Germany today sees the world leaders come together to discuss international issues. Prime Minister Boris Johnson will promise a further £429 million of World Bank loans to support Ukraine. Leaders are also discussing banning Russian gold exports and placing a cap on Russian oil prices, but do they actually get anything done? I mean, is it just a knees up where they all go and just have a catch up and drink nice drinks and have a nice time with each other? So today in the Great British Debate, I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? You can email your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or why not tweet me at gbnews. So today it is time for Outside. I'm speaking to someone who has had a great career and success as an author. Back in October, the actress Reese Witherspoon chose Chibundu Onuzo's novel as her book club pick of the month in October. And Chibundu's received international acclaim recently in the New York Times. But now she's turning her hand to music. Her new single, Coming Home, is available to stream now. So why not meet her? She's here. I'm joined now by Chibundu Onuzo. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I love that headgear.
Thank you.
It's a great colour. I want to try that on. Does it come off? Why does it go?
It does come off, but it's mine, just for my head today.
I see. Are you hiding something behind there?
No, I'm not actually. It's all mine.
Is it? No, it's great. It's fabulous. So Chibundu, talk to me then. You're an author.
Yes.
What kind of books do you write? And Reese Witherspoon, wow, that's a bit of an accolade. Sort of wanting to selecting your book?
Yeah, I mean, so I write novels set initially in Nigeria, but my most recent, Sankofa, is a story about a British West African woman looking for her father.
Really? And can you divulge any more of the story without spoiling it? Because people will probably want to read it.
Oh, yes, of course. So her father comes over as a student, has an affair with her mother, and returns to West Africa. And so she's 48 and has never met him. And she discovers a diary that he wrote when he was a student, and then goes on a quest and an adventure to find him.
Can you reveal whether she finds him or not? That's not...
Well, I mean, she does find him.
Yes.
That's not a spoiler. She finds him, but she doesn't find exactly what she's expecting to find.
Interesting. Sounds intriguing. So Reese Witherspoon selected that book. What's the book called?
Sankofa.
Sankofa.
Yes.
What did Reese Witherspoon say, and, how did she get her hands on the book?
I don't know how she got it, actually. I have a very good publicist in America, and so she must have sent it to someone in her team who sent it to her, and she really enjoyed it. Yeah, she was great.
That's amazing. And did you get to speak to her or anything, or did
Well, it was at the height of the pandemic, so I didn't meet her, but we sort of exchanged emails and, yeah, spoke.
That's quite good. You've got Reese Witherspoon's email, just sort of word with her about that. So what's your backstory then? I mean, were you born in this country? What's your story?
So I was born in Nigeria, and I lived there till I was 14. And then I moved here and went to school in Winchester. And I have been here, well, I've lived here ever since.
And what did it make it this country?
What did I make of England? It's nice.
It's a good country, isn't it? I love it here. I love it. I was born in Newcastle. I love this place. Now, talk to me a little bit about why you've moved from writing, or are you still writing? Are you still writing?
Yes.
So what got you into your singing?
So it's something I've done and I've always enjoyed. So I grew up playing the piano, grew up singing in the church choir, and yeah, just really enjoyed it. And I think what happened was that writing took off first. And so I signed my first book deal when I was 19. And then this whole writing career just emerged. And I found it really difficult to write and make space for my singing. And I sort of went off on the writing track. But it's just something I've always enjoyed doing and have wanted to explore further. And so now I'm exploring it.
Well, we'll have a listen to a little bit of your song in a minute. What would you say has been the best thing that you've done in your career so far?
The best thing? So I did a show at the South Bank called 1991. And it was the story of my life so far, told in music, song and dance. And I think it was the first project where I was able to marry all my interests, in my writing interests, my music interests, all my interests in one project. And so I think, yeah, that was the best thing.
What about the worst thing, most embarrassing thing you've...
The worst thing was probably when my first book was published. So when you're a debut author, you think you're going to have all these events and lots of people are going to turn up. And I went for a literary festival and there were like 3 people in the audience and maybe 2 of them were related to me.
Oh, so God, no, that's not good.
So yeah, I think, yeah, the trudge of publicity.
I think the worst thing I've ever had to do in terms of an audition, I went to this audition and they had literally picked me as the person because we were doing this dance to MC Hammer's Can't Touch This. I had the baggy trousers and everything like that, and I was doing the routine. They said, yeah, her. But then I didn't realise that they changed the song. And the next day we had to come back in and sort of re-audition to the big people who'd seen and selected me. And they said, OK, well, we want you to sing a bit of it as well. And do you know what song they picked? The Final Countdown by Europe. And I mean, it's so high, I'm an alto, I've got the deepest voice. It was the most embarrassing thing I've ever had to do. Sing and dance, and I couldn't sing. I could, honestly.
Are you going to give us a sample?
I won't be doing that, but you will. Let's have a listen to your track then. What is it called?
It's called Coming Home.
Coming Home by Chibundu Onuzo. Let's have a listen.
I know I'm messed up, but I'm human and I'm learning all the time. When are you coming home? If you walk away, you never know what we could build if you had only stayed. So when are you coming home? Come home, baby. I know I messed up, but I'm working hard to make things right. Come back to me, my love.
Oh, that was sort of Erykah Badu, a bit of, what's her name, New York, who's that?
Alicia Keys.
Yeah, Alicia Keys. That was a bit Erykah Badu, Alicia Keys.
I'll take it.
I love your hair. That's all yours as well.
Thank you. It is all mine, yes.
So jealous. I'm not jealous at all. I'm all right with it. Well, just because I'm bald under this, you don't know about it. No. But amazing. That's a fabulous song. It's a great voice. It really is memorable, isn't it? It's a very specific voice there. Who would you say is your influence then? Because I think I've named them, but who would you say?
So Nina Simone, I would add Nina Simone to that list. I just think she's a legend. She was a singer who had something to say, and she said it with her music, and she was just so talented, the piano, all of it. Well,
I like the fact that you can play the piano and sing at the same time. I think that's very talented and very, very good. And I think we'll be seeing more of you.
Thank you.
Will you promise? Because they're going to put the music back on this show. I've been asking for the music. Everybody knows how I feel about the music. We used to have the music on every Saturday. I'm going to try and get the music back. I really would like to get that back. And then maybe you can perform for us in
that would be nice.
That'd be amazing. Well, thank you. I wish you all the best. Chibundu, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Fabulous stuff. If people want to find out more, where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Chibundu.Onuzo. So find me there.
Brilliant. Well, I'll follow you, but you better follow me back, otherwise you're dead to me.
OK.
Fabulous. Right, that's Chibundu Onuzo. Fabulous stuff. Right, coming up, the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? I mean, they met in Germany today. Boris Johnson and French President Emmanuel Macron agreed the conflict in Ukraine is at a crucial moment, with an opportunity to turn the tide in the war. US President Joe Biden has appealed for unity in both the G7 and NATO, and there are a lot of big pledges, but will actually anything get done? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? But first, it's the weather.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking breezy in the southeast and wet and windy in the north and west. Let's take a look at the detail. In southwest England, there will be some showers for northern and western parts. Further east, it will be drier and sunnier, but a little blustery. In southeast England, there'll be plenty of sunshine this evening. It'll also be quite dry with some high cloud. Western parts of Wales, very windy, especially around coastal areas, with showers continuing as well. Further east, it will be drier. The West Midlands looking mostly fine throughout the evening, but it will be breezy and there could be one or two showers here and there. The weather should be fine and quite warm for the northeast of England. A few showers possible, but it will be dry for most, especially near coastlines. Plenty of showers across Scotland, the heaviest in the west. Parts of the east staying mostly dry. It will also be quite windy too. And a similar picture for Northern Ireland. Plenty of showers as we head through the evening with some blustery winds. So showers continuing to spread from the north and west overnight. Southeastern parts will remain fine. And that's how the weather's shaping up overnight and into tomorrow morning.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
we embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fact
naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
So good afternoon. If you just joined me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio, and it is fast approaching 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. And it is time for our Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? Now, at the summit in Germany today, the UK and France have agreed to provide more support for the Ukraine in the war against Russia. The UK, US, Japan and Canada have agreed to ban Russian gold imports, and leaders are also discussing placing a cap on Russian oil prices. So tackling Russia is a very high on the agenda at the summit. So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it all actually a waste of time? Do they do anything there? I'm joined now by the political editor at the Express Online, David Maddox. David, thank you for joining me. Look, Boris was not there. Why was he not there? Where was Boris?
This is a good question. This is a good question. I'm actually in the process of trying to find that out. He was certainly around earlier for the lunch and the official photo and things. So maybe he's just cleared off for a nice Bavarian beer or something. You know?
Probably. So who are they? What's it all about? Because people see that and they think G7, Barack Obama flies in or whoever it is at the time. What is it? What do they do?
So it's basically an annual shindig for the powerful, for the most powerful 7 countries now and biggest economies. Not quite all the biggest economies, but the biggest 7 economies in the democratic world, at least. And it's. On one side, it's a nice get together for the most powerful political leaders. It makes them all feel important, but they do actually talk about some serious stuff. So, for instance, when it was held in Cornwall recently, they actually kind of try to tie up minimum corporation tax, which they're trying to force onto the rest of the world, of 15%. So, things do get done, and obviously Ukraine's top of the list here.
Well, I mean, didn't they pledge in Cornwall? I mean, something the COVAX thing, that there's sharing of vaccine doses and promise to share them around the world. But as I heard in Rwanda, one of the people there complained that actually a lot of those vaccine doses didn't actually get out there. I mean, they seem to make these great pledges. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, what they agree doesn't always happen. Let's be blunt about it. And I'm not always sure that there's a willingness to make things happen. I mean, you could be cynical about it and say it's just a nice party with some posh food and some expensive drink in a kind of holiday resort that most of us can't afford. It does provide a nice bit of advertising for the place they choose. I'm sure a few people will be looking at the Bavarian Alps now, and Cornwall got a few people on the back of it last time. So
who are they then? The top 7. I mean, who are the current ones? You've got let's see. You've got Justin Trudeau. Have you got there for Canada? He's one of them. Boris Johnson, UK. Joe Biden.
When he's around.
United
Joe
States.
Biden, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, he spoke. He didn't really make much. I mean, I listened to bits of stuff, but he wasn't really. Did he do a good speech overall? Did people respond well to him?
No. I mean, it's as ever with Biden. It's all very rambling, and you get his supporters trying to say it's the greatest speech of all time, but.
And Germany and Italy, they're in the G7, aren't they? They're still currently buying a lot of Russian oil and gas, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And Mario Draghi, who's not even an elected prime minister, he's basically an appointed bureaucrat. Used to be in charge of a European Central Bank, and because the latest Italian crisis, he got appointed and has basically been acting as a almost a mini dictator throughout COVID and things. And he's quite a character. He's dragging.
So in your view, then, is it a waste of time? Or is it actually quite a productive thing?
I think even on a kind of symbolic level, it's quite important because it does get these powerful people together. It does force them to at least discuss the issues. Some important things do get agreed. They don't always follow through, but it's important that these discussions are taking place. Given that most of them are banging on about environmental objectives and us not flying, it's quite ironic that they fly to the G7 to do that. They fly to the G20, which is a slightly bigger version of the group, and all the other versions of these things. I expect environmental stuff's actually on this discussion as well. So,
No, that's COP26. They've had 26 of those things as well. Nothing much has happened. David, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. That's David Malloxy. Thank you so much. He's the political editor of The Express Online. Well, I'm also joined by security specialist Will Geddes. Will, OK, so, we have these things all the time. COP26, that means there's been 26 of them.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about stuff. I don't really see that much will happen.
Yeah.
They all flew there in private jets. We've now got G7, another one of these. I don't know how many we've had in total. Are these things a waste of time in your view?
No, I don't think they are, actually, to be honest. You've got really two major events of world leaders. You've got the G7, which is kind of politically biased and trying to drive on political platforms many of the initiatives that globally everybody needs to contribute to. And then you've got the G20, which is bringing in all the other countries to look at the more sort of financial and economic implications on the world stage, and in terms of certainly how various countries can support each other, monies can be donated or certainly pushed towards emerging countries, places which require financial support and development. So I think there's an awful lot. Now, although no laws or major initiatives are necessarily agreed in a legal framework at a G7 meeting, I think the key thing is getting everybody together and getting all the world leaders together, albeit for a short period of time, gives them a chance to be able to bounce ideas. And that's fundamentally what they use it for, to throw ideas around and hopefully come out with some universal agreements. They don't always work, but they can be very useful.
I'm trying to think of something that it's brought about that has been a good thing. So,
well, the malaria inoculations and certainly the battling against malaria on a global level, particularly in emerging countries, they were very successful on that. The COVID was a bit of a misfire on the vaccines.
Because they're supposed to give out all those vaccines, they didn't.
Absolutely. They also, as a group, pushed forward for multinational companies to pay more contributions to tax as well.
What happened? Did anything come from
No, something did come with that. And actually, they did push through to countries, and particularly to these companies, that the chance is that they can't just evade it by using various different offshore havens to transfer tax, and particularly things like corporation tax. They wanted to make sure that within the jurisdictions of their operations, they would be liable for more, which is very important because, it's always a topical subject, isn't it, Nana?
Well, what about online stuff then, online safety and things? Because you always hear the thing, we can't because it's Facebook and they're not based here, and da-da-da-da, so they sort of negate responsibility of the behaviours of these companies because they're not based in the UK.
Yeah, but they still have to file their accounts somewhere.
Yes.
So even though it may be a virtual business of sorts and it's just a bunch of propeller heads pushing buttons and tapping keys away to obviously keep their large business operating, they will have to file their accounts somewhere. And it's preventing, and I think a lot of the G7 are in agreement, that some of these companies are highly profitable, so they can't get away. But from my perspective, being a security guy, I'm not an economist, as you can probably tell, from a security perspective, really important because it actually builds on the Five Eyes partnership, which is obviously Australia, New Zealand, Canada, United States and the UK.
But it's New Zealand. I don't think they're in it. Are they New Zealand?
No, they're not in G7, but they are in the Five Eyes partnership, which is the intelligence sharing.
Do you think there's too many of these things? The Five Eyes, the G7, the G20, the COP26, the this, the that. NATO, UN. Look, this feels a bit like lots of different mashed up groups.
Oh, it is. But each of those groups have their own particular functions. So G7, all of those members are members of NATO. So at the moment, again, as your previous guest was saying, Ukraine is very much top of the agenda. We are edging ever so close into a World War III, if we're not already in it.
We're in it,
and
aren't
some people would say that we are.
We are, aren't we?
But we are looking at a asymmetric warfare. It's something that we've never experienced before, because this isn't a conventional war. This is a war that's virtual, it's online, it's cyber, it's energy, it's economy, and it's potentially nuclear. So it's big. There are lots of factors at play here.
I'd like to hear them talk more about Ukraine, and I'd like to see those countries who are part of the G7, like Germany and Italy, I'd like to see them stop the use of Russian oil and gas. Because I feel they've talked a lot about it. I mean, the Germans supplied, some headgear when they promised to supply long-range missiles, and I don't know whether they've done it or not. This war's been dragged out, and to me, it feels like talks, nothing actually happening.
Yeah, but again, the whether G7 thing could be quite useful is not only in terms of peer pressure being placed on a particular country like Germany, for example, but also a reassurance by looking that person dead in the eye, like you and me today, looking that person in the eye and saying, yes, we will back you up, we will support you, and that we're all in this together. We've got to remember that the vast majority of Europe still requires or has had 40% of their gas supply from Russia.
Yeah.
And although we've made a commitment in the UK to cut off by the end of this year, America is doing much the same. A large part of Europe's got to consider where they're going to get that gas from. So, it's hugely challenging right now.
Is Russia not part of the G7?
No, they used to be part of the G7, but they got kicked out in 2014 when they annexed Crimea.
Yeah.
So they were part of the G8 as it originally was. Now, in fact, the G7 was originally a G6. But it became a G8 with Russia, with Putin, and then he was booted out.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Right, so you think these are definitely something that should be carried on and that they are actually useful?
I think so, because they're on the world stage, and all of these heads of state also know that they've got to come away from these meetings with something, because otherwise, much like yourself, Nana, people will look at it and say, what's the point?
And ultimately, a lot of the countries that aren't in it, so China, they're not in the G7, are they?
No, because that really comes down to
individuals. They're not in NATO, are they?
No,
I mean, all the people that we need to all the states that we're concerned about are not in these groups, and they deliberately stay out of them. So China is not in there. We've kicked Russia out. Who else? What about
Latin America?
North Korea? All those people that we,
I'm not sure how much North Korea would contribute positively to the conversation.
Yeah, but by the premise of it, you want people to be around the table on the global stage who are heads of big countries, who can contribute something and add some sort of collective unity, right?
Yeah, but
so
if they want to positively contribute to it, that's the thing.
But the ones that we really want to be talking to aren't at the table.
But where the benefit of the G7 is that it's like-minded people looking for a common aim and a common goal. And where G7's been highly efficient in the whole Ukraine conflict is that they have consolidated together and cooperated together to impose these draconian sanctions, which have now been imposed on Russia.
And then they're sort of selling their oil and gas to the people outside those institutions, aren't they?
Well, they might be.
They are. And they're probably making more money out of that as well. And the people in them are still buying the Russian oil and gas.
Because
anyway.
they have to, because there's alternate supplies they need to still find.
So how much use is it? Will Geddes, thank you so much for joining me. A pleasure to speak to you. That is, of course, Will Geddes. He's a security specialist. This is GB News. Let's have a quick look at what you've been saying. Lindsay says the G7 is a dangerous waste of time. They all agree on globalist policies that go against the national interest. Thomas says the G7 is hugely important. It's a useful forum for major nations to discuss international diplomacy. Well, keep your thoughts coming. You know the coup at GB News, or why not send me that email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way, we'll continue a Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? Now, you'll hear the thoughts of my panel, columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. Yes, the headlines this hour's world leaders at the G7 summit are outlining their plans to support the cost of living with a range of global infrastructure projects. Speaking at the event in Germany, US President Joe Biden also said the group need to continue to take a united stance against what he called Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. He says Western allies will also fund nearly £500 billion spread out over the next 5 years.
Collectively, we aim to mobilize nearly $600 billion from the G7 by 2027. These strategic investments are areas of critical to sustainable development and to our shared global stability.
Deadly missile strikes have hit the Ukrainian capital for the first time in weeks. A 7-year-old girl trapped underneath fallen rubble had to be pulled to safety after Russian forces hit residential areas and a kindergarten. At least one person died and 6 others were hurt, with the city's mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, saying medics were still looking for survivors. Here, the Prime Minister says his golden rule is to focus on what we're doing, as he suggested he's planning to be in office for another 2 terms. Boris Johnson's comments came after the Conservatives lost 2 by-elections last week. Speaking at the G7 summit earlier, he said he's not had time to reflect on his regrets while in office, but says the government's achievements have been remarkable so far. And families impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic may take legal action against the government over delays to starting the coronavirus public inquiry. The so-called COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group says the 6-month delay in appointing a chair and setting a date goes beyond the reasonable time allowed by law. The Prime Minister had previously suggested the date would be set in the spring, but hasn't yet done it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time to go back to Nana Akua after this.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere. We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 37 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Now, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is the G7 a waste of time? Now, the summit has taken place in Germany today, and the discussions are focused on providing more support for Ukraine in their fight against Russia. So for this Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is it a waste of time, though? I mean, what are they talking about? Do they seriously achieve anything? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also consultant editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Right, I'm going to start with you, Lizzie. The G7, it sort of reminds me of something that Gemma Collins, the G7, I'm the GC or whatever.
The GC.
They've got so many things, G7, G20, COP26, there's been 26 of the damn things, nothing's actually happened. I mean, well, what do you think? Is this something that is...
I think it's important. I'll tell you why, because these are the most wealthy countries and you need to get all the leaders in a room and hopefully stuff can get done. I know they can't pass any laws, but in the past things have been done like malaria, helping with AIDS and loads of big issues. And Ukraine need the main leaders to be united and supportive and to crush Putin, put him back in his box, and they need to agree. And I know there's going to be some diversities behind the scenes, I'm sure, behind the scenes. I mean, because you've got Macron and Joe Biden all having a few difficult times at home, including Boris Johnson. But we have our wealthiest countries all in one room, and hopefully they can unite and help Ukraine. And I know that there's going to be a broadcast tomorrow from Zelensky about how they're doing, but he's going to find out who's with him and who's not, who's an ally, who's a real friend, because he can't just have words. We need military, proper help now. Words, you can't just have words of support, that's not enough. So he will see who is really on his side from this.
I'm sceptical. Andrew, what do you think?
Useless talking shop. Utterly useless. I had to look up who are in the G7. Italy. What the hell is Italy doing in the G7? With respect, Lizzie, it's a minor European player. It's had about 50 prime ministers in 50 years. It's constantly in chaos. It is not one of the world's great powers. Where is China? Why aren't they there? Where is South Korea? In fact, nobody from Asia is in there at all. Where are the emerging economies? Where are the strongest economies now? Asia. It's a complete waste of time. You saw Joe Biden muttering and spluttering through his speech. I had to look up the name of the German Chancellor. Can anybody remember his name? And he's the host at the moment. What is his name?
Olaf Scholz.
Scholz.
I only remember him because it's got the same name as that thing from Frozen.
What's the Italian Prime Minister's name? What's the Italian Prime Minister's name? You don't know.
I don't know.
And so look, it's UK, Germany, France, Italy, Canada. Why is Canada there?
Trudeau.
But we've got India as a guest that will be coming. But this will be great because
the G8. G9.
We can put a wedge now. The leaders can put a wedge between them and Russia. They really can forceful. We can do some great things for Ukraine with this. And India have been ambiguous with their stance. So,
they have.
So come on, let's put a wedge and do something. We have to, and we've got to act now. And you know, it's going to be difficult. Look, we know that Boris has not got on with a couple of them there, the French and the Germans, how it's going to work out. But they need to do more. What is France and Germany going to do? They need to do more to help.
Well, look, it's all agreed beforehand, you know, this big communique about gold. We're not going to do trading with Russia with gold. That's all agreed in phone calls before, which they could do all on the telephone. Do they care about climate change? There'll be thousands of people at this summit flying in on private jets, the usual old hypocrisy. And the talking will go on for days. Well, who remembers what the G7 agreed last year or the year before that? And why, by the way, hadn't they agreed to stop trading gold with Russia the moment the invasion happened? Not the one last year, the one this year, the one in 2014 in Crimea.
But we need further sanctions against Russia. We need it now.
But we know that. But the problem is, and I mean, I'm sort of warming towards Andrew's perspective because that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Italy, who are benefiting from lots of Russian oil and gas, and Germany, who are benefiting from a lot of Russian oil and gas, then Russia, who are not in the G7, China, who are not in the G7, as Andrew said, a lot of the Asian countries not in the G7, North Korea, all the people that you'd actually really need to get around the table who have some real influence globally, who can make difference to things like climate change, and all these things are not in the G7. Then there's the G20 that comes up with more of the countries, and then you've got, I mean, it's just...
But it affects the whole world. The whole world is on red alert.
Yeah, but
the whole world
but they don't,
need to
but
take
they're not doing
action.
anything. OK, so last time it was about vaccine equity and it was all about spreading vaccines across the world. Well, they didn't do it. I mean, they talked about it, about vaccine efficacy, to make sure that lots of countries shared the vaccine. They had a target. I think it was 1 billion doses or whatever it was. They didn't achieve it. I mean, they were nowhere near it.
Look at the world today. We've got food, international food supplies, energy prices up, soaring. It's affecting everyone, this war, so they've all got to do something.
Germany is hosting this because they've got the rotating presidency of the G7. Germany promised Ukraine heavy military equipment. All they've supplied are helmets. It's pathetic and it's risible.
Today,
but
hopefully
the trouble is they won't be. Nobody's going to say to the Chancellor Schloss, whatever his name is, who's the host, "Oi, mate, where is the heavy bombardment artillery equipment that you've promised Ukraine?" It's not there because they'll all be dignified and polite in public because it's all about photo opportunities, looking good and it's a talking
Well,
shop
let's
that
hope
could be
Boris
scrapped.
can flex his muscles and do something and shame them into doing more.
Yeah, well, because
for
Boris, I know you're very
Ukraine.
critical of Boris, but on Ukraine, he's been
I agree
ahead
with
of the
you.
game.
I agree with
he
you
has
on
been
that.
ahead of the game.
There are many things I'm not happy with Boris about, but with Ukraine there is one that.
But that literally is the only thing on the list that people are happy with him. When they had a list, they had at the bottom of it was the fact that the one thing that over 60% of people on the poll suggested was that his handling of Ukraine, but everything else he scored quite lowly. So, especially in his policies as well. The policies, I think, got 20 extra points where people have decided that the Tory policies were just simply not helping anyone.
Shouldn't have raised
But the thing is that
ridiculous.
Putin has to be stopped. We don't know, what he's going to do next. He's a madman. He needs to be put back in his box. And,
but they're not serious, Lizzie. They're not serious.
They
I mean,
have
look,
to be, because
even
Moldova,
Ukraine
it could be Finland next.
Yeah,
Who
but
knows?
even Ukraine, and very generously of Vladimir Zelensky, he's still allowing that Nord Stream 1 pipeline to be pumping Russian oil and gas underneath Ukraine. So it's like, I mean, if it were me, I'd probably blasted that thing and said, forget it. But he's still allowing Europe to be supplied with this Russian oil and gas. So, there's a lot more.
Well, the G7 needs to have unity, and it's crucial that they all agree and do more. And let's see what happens.
Well, does look very nice, though, Bavaria. It's very nice of the Bavarian Tories board.
It does, doesn't it? They do good beer there as well.
Yeah.
It's just on the Austrian border.
Yeah.
Well, that's why they're all there. They're drinking that nice.
Apparently, they look very good in lederhosen. I think Liz looks great in lederhosen, don't you?
I think
absolutely fabulous in lederhosen.
Perhaps our previous guest, Will Geddes, will have something to say about that.
I'm told he's got a whole wardrobe.
I think Will's got the hot.
Might see Boris in it in a minute.
Well, listen.
Oh, that is not a pretty thought.
No, it isn't. Well, listen. Another story. Let's move on, because another story that caught my eye today was drivers who kill could receive life sentences as part of changes coming into force this week. Now, judges will be able to hand down life sentences to dangerous drivers who kill and careless drivers who kill while under the influence of drink and drugs. The current penalty for each crime is a maximum prison sentence of 14 years. Joining me now is barrister Chris Daw QC. Chris Daw, right. So, Chris, tell me what is the new change in the law?
Well, there are a number of new changes, but the most significant one is to increase the maximum sentence for causing death by dangerous driving from 14 years to life, and likewise for causing death by careless driving whilst under the influence of drink or drugs from 14 years to life. There's also the introduction of a completely new crime, which we've never had before, which is causing serious injury by careless driving. Which is a very serious offence now under this new law, and again will carry a very long sentence of imprisonment. So what we're seeing in effect is a range of measures, the effect of which is to increase the level of criminality attached to driving offences.
Now, do you think that these longer sentences are actually going to help to stop people from drink driving, or do you think they won't make any difference at all?
No, they won't make any difference at all, and they never have. I mean, we've seen a ratcheting up of sentences across the board. You need to kind of think about this from another perspective, I suppose, which is if you are prosecuted for drink driving and you haven't killed anyone, the maximum time you can go to prison is 6 months. But if you are drink driving and you do kill someone, it's going to be life in prison. So it's the same offence, the same actions as you've had too much to drink and driven a car. It's just that in one case someone's died, in another case nobody died. And for me, I don't understand why you're punishing the consequences rather than the act. And that's what we're seeing here. And I'm afraid when you talk about causing serious injury by careless driving being a long sentence of imprisonment, careless driving is pulling out a junction without looking properly. I mean, everybody does that at least once a year, let's put it that way.
Well, maybe you do, Chris. I'm a very good driver. I don't do that. But listen, what if... I mean, I hear you, but I think that you have to take these cases individually, because if someone had pulled out on you and, did something where it caused you an injury, then you would want to see them punished properly as well. So I'm quite glad about that, because you hear people doing things like that and getting only, say, 3 years or something like that. So I think a new penalty like that is a good thing. Don't you think that's a good thing?
No, because I don't agree at all. I think the point is that you say that you never do that. Well, you may be an absolute
I'm joking,
driver.
Chris. I'm joking.
All right, fair enough. But that's the point, you see. You're holding people to a standard because something terrible happened.
Absolutely.
Sorry?
Absolutely. If you do it and you sort of get away with it and nobody gets injured and you get caught, then you should be punished, of course, for doing the thing. But if you do it and then somebody gets injured and then that person is seriously injured, that punishment's got to be worse, surely.
Why?
What do you mean, why? I personally, if they'd done something to me, I'd want to see them punished. I wouldn't be happy, because also the person will then think, oh, well, it's OK, I did that, I only got a couple of years. There's no disincentive for people who might perhaps reconsider their actions if they knew that there was a real punishment if something bad happened.
Well, let's talk about the drink driving for a start. The reason I say why is because my point is a really straightforward one. If everybody in the country sometimes, even momentarily, drives carelessly, forgets to indicate, these are the sorts of levels of kind of carelessness, which I'm not saying they're good things. Of course, we shouldn't do them. But in the real world, drivers who drive thousands and thousands of miles a year will make small mistakes. The difference is, nearly every time, nobody dies, nobody's hurt, nothing happens, and nobody's punished at all. And it's just the sheer chance that someone happens to have been injured in one of those 1 in a million situations, or happens to have died in one of those situations, that leads to a potential life sentence. It's not because someone's done anything morally worse or more culpable. It's just because by sheer chance there's been a terrible catastrophe. And for me, sentencing if you're going to have long sentences, it should reflect moral culpability, someone who's seriously, intentionally done something terrible, rather than an incidental consequence of someone's actions.
Well, Chris, I think that's interesting. You should say that. I think it's more than 1 in a million. And if I was that 1 in a million, I'd be furious if somebody got away without being punished. Chris QC, thank you so much for joining me. Great to talk to you. Right, let's see what my panel make of that. Andrew Pearce, Lizzie Cundy.
I've looked up because I remember writing about this, and I disagree with your guest, because actually it should be about deterrent.
Absolutely.
You want to prevent people driving dangerously, drink driving, being on there. The Labour peer, Lord Army, this is in 2007, was jailed for 12 weeks for dangerous driving after admitting he was texting while driving on a motorway just before being involved in a fatal crash.
Exactly.
So he hit a car, the driver of the other car was killed, and he'd been texting 12 weeks. How was that ever?
That's ridiculous. I totally agree with you.
If you get away with doing your texting...
And it's also people that are very tired. You know, when you're driving and you know, I remember seeing this car swerving in front of me, and the guy was nearly asleep at the wheel, and I had to beep him.
If you're in charge of a car, Lizzie, you're potentially in charge of a lethal weapon. That's the point. And I'm afraid you've got to use deterrence all the time. Young men in particular, they have lots of crashes when they first get the keys of the car. They're driving too fast. If there's a possibility they can go to prison for 15 years, they just might think a bit harder about it.
I think people can be very stupid behind the wheel. Like the tailgaters think, I just come out and I think to myself, listen, you don't get it. If you bump into the back of me, even if you don't damage my car heavily, we're going to have to stop here. We're going to spend about half an hour exchanging details, this and that, this and that. And my car might not work, and then... You're not thinking about what the implications of your behaviour will be.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm all for this.
Yeah,
I'm
much tougher.
I don't know what
actually,
Chris is talking about.
people, if they're on a mobile phone and they've got one hand only on the wheel, haven't they?
Yeah.
So that is dangerous. And, and at the moment, what is it, 6 penalty points? Ban them.
I think you should
get
just
caught.
put the phone away.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in the car, just put it away.
If we took it more seriously, people would take it more seriously.
They would.
And that's why people aren't taking it seriously right now.
Do you know what I find really unbelievable? When I'm walking to the tube in the morning, I often see mums, it's normally mums, let's be honest, on the school run, a couple of kids in the back seat. They're on their mobile phone. And they've got 2 children in the car.
Well, that's it.
People need to realise.
But sadly, people are getting away with it. Look, we've recently had the Katie Price
oh, my God.
case.
How's she getting away with
it?
She's Teflon, she is.
She's got a good lawyer, presumably.
Well, it's not giving a very good example. People thinking they can get away.
I mean, I saw the picture of that, and that car looked like it was this way up on a tree. I'm like, how can you even drive the car up the tree like that and actually get away with it? Unbelievable.
Very lucky not to be hurt or hurt anyone else.
Absolutely.
That's for sure.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Right, well, let's move on, because it is time for the Supplement Sunday, the part of the show where we discuss some of the other stories making the headlines. Today, if you've just tuned in, I'm joined by columnist and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy, and also columnist and editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Right, Lizzie, you've got a story about Prince Charles.
Oh, I do. Charlie boy, yes. Here he is. Now, Prince Charles wants slave trade to be taught as widely as the Holocaust. So Prince Charles has reportedly called for the history of trafficking by slave traders of African people to be taught widely as the Holocaust in Great Britain. But he did stop short, however, of an apology for his own family's historic involvement.
Because he won't be worried about the lawyers, because then they'd get the bill. then the royal family go to war. Because don't forget, Elizabeth I's monarchy was enriched by Walter Raleigh and Francis Drake engaged in the slave trade. I mean, how many hundreds of years are we going to go back? The Holocaust happened in the lifetime of one of my neighbours whose family died in the Holocaust.
I'm tired of this. I'm so tired of them saying we need to... Listen, what they need to do, if they're going to teach the slave trade, is actually teach the truth about it, OK? It was a trade. It was a legitimate trade. It was between black people and white people, and the people in Africa sold their people to become slaves, and white people bought the slaves. I mean, you know, the people in Africa are culpable for the sale of the slaves. The white people are culpable for buying the slaves. It is the wrong trade, but it is still going on today. What I'd like to see is them telling the story of the history of mankind. So starting off with the fact that mankind came from Africa, to make everybody realise that we are one race, and racism is a construct, that it doesn't really exist. We are one race. If you divide people by telling them a story about how black people were slaves, then suddenly it re-educates the people in the class to suddenly look at black people differently. I remember when they taught that at school, and suddenly I thought, you know, why should they be perpetuating a narrative that black people are lesser because they came from slaves? And it's rubbish.
Well said.
We're all the same.
Exactly.
We all came from Africa. That's where mankind came from. If they taught that history, then I think we'd be better off.
Well said. Couldn't have said it better myself.
I thought we came from Adam and Eve.
Did you? Yeah, but they're white. Why they couldn't have been there?
He's still got his leaf on. That's white down there under the table.
Yeah.
Right, and you've got a story, Andrew, about Nigel Farage's tips for Boris.
Well, he's written a really powerful article in the Mail on Sunday today saying, look, you lost 2 by-elections, man, you deserve to, because Boris Johnson had this fantastic mandate in the general election just a couple of years ago and a bit. Lizzie's very anti-Boris at the moment. The mantra was, get Brexit done. Well, what benefits are we seeing? OK, so we're not paying the vast rates of money into the EU that was getting wasted. But as he says, even basic things like border control, the Northern Ireland route, none of this has been sorted out. The problems with the Channel, they're trying to make a good go of it with Rwanda, but he's just saying, if you don't get a grip, Boris, of the great dividends that can come to this country in Brexit, you will lose, and you deserve to lose. And he warns the Remainers, Jeremy Hunt, David Cameron, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader...
the Brexit voters on side. They voted for Brexit.
If the Remainers get back in, they will do everything they can to unpick it.
Well, you saw them trying to unpick it before. Well, let's finish with you, Lizzie. Finally, you've got Boris wants to run 3 more terms.
Good old Boris, brazen Boris Johnson, has said he's thinking actively about a 3rd term in office that would last until the mid-2030s. Can you believe, despite the losing in the 2 by-elections, he's still saying he's staying and he's not going anywhere and he's going to be with us for a very long time. Let me tell you, that is one deluded man. I give him at that. He's confident. I wish I had his confidence, but, man, you are deluded.
Final word to you, Andrew. You've got about 10 seconds.
That was a very silly thing
Can he
to
just
say.
concentrate on getting the 1st term sorted and doing it well and winning the next election?
Yeah,
that's what he needs
focus on the cost of living crisis.
Yes.
For goodness sake, if you get us out of this, we'll be happy.
Get our taxes down.
Honestly, seriously, honestly. Well, anyway, listen, on today's show, we've been asking, is appeasing the Red Wall a conflict of Tory interests? And according to our Twitter poll, 42% of you said yes, 57% of you, again, somebody can't do the maths, 42, 57, it's 58% of you said no. So there we go. That's the way it goes. Now, listen, it's always a pleasure to talk to you here on GB News. You can catch up with the programme on the GB News app, or you can even find us on YouTube. And don't forget to like and share my Gary Lineker monologue. Well, I'm going to say thank you so much to my fabulous panellist and columnist and broadcaster, Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie, thank you so much for joining me. And also editor at the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce.
Very nice to see you again.
Andrew, thank you so much. And as ever, it's always a pleasure to say thank you to you for joining me at home for your company. Well, I shall be back again at 4 on Friday. I'm going to leave you with the weather forecast. Have a fabulous week. And don't forget, stay with GB News. There's still so much more to come.
Looking ahead to this evening's weather, and the UK is looking breezy in the southeast and wet and windy in the north and west. Let's take a look at the detail. In southwest England, there will be some showers for northern and western parts. Further east, it will be drier and sunnier, but a little blustery. In southeast England, there'll be plenty of sunshine this evening. It'll also be quite dry with some high cloud. Western parts of Wales, very windy, especially around coastal areas, with showers continuing as well. Further east, it will be drier. The West Midlands looking mostly fine throughout the evening, but it will be breezy and there could be 1 or 2 showers here and there. The weather should be fine and quite warm for the northeast of England. A few showers possible, but it will be dry for most, especially near coastlines. Plenty of showers across Scotland, the heaviest in the west. Parts of the east staying mostly dry. It will also be quite windy too.